It is 8:47 on a Tuesday night. You are rebuilding a deck your boss was supposed to finish because their version was thrown together between meetings and the client call is at 9 in the morning. Nobody officially told you to do this. They did not have to. You opened the file, saw what was inside, and understood without a single word being exchanged that if you did not fix it, your name would end up attached to the failure, even though their name was on the title slide. That is where the trap actually lives. Not in the loud demands, not in the late night emails, in the silences, in the gaps your boss leaves behind that somehow always need filling and somehow always get filled by you. Some bosses do not dump work on you by openly commanding it. They dump work on you by becoming mysteriously bad at exactly the parts of the job they do not want to do. They forget. They do not know the system. They thought you already had it. They are not as detail-oriented as you. They trust your judgment more than theirs. They did not see the email. They were going to get to it, but the day got away from them. Before long, you were doing your own job, half of theirs, and the invisible glue work nobody else can name. People have started calling this weaponized incompetence, and it is a useful phrase as long as we draw a careful boundary around it. This is not about every overwhelmed, new, or genuinely struggling manager. Plenty of bosses are buried in things they were never trained for, and that is a separate problem. The pattern this video is about looks different from the outside. The confusion benefits one person. The forgetting always finds the same desk. The inability appears around the unglamorous task and disappears the second a high-status opportunity walks into the room. Truly incompetent bosses generate chaos in every direction. A boss using selective incompetence generates chaos in very specific places. That distinction is the entire game. The first version of this you ever encountered did not feel like exploitation. It felt like flattery. You are just better at this than I am. You are so organized. You explain things better. I trust your judgment more than my own on this one. Can you take it? Can you handle it? Can you run with it? It feels good in the moment because being told you are exceptional is rare enough that most people do not interrogate it. But praise inside a workplace is rarely just praise. The compliment is the wrapper. The workload is the package inside. Your capability becomes obligation. Obligation becomes expectation. Expectation becomes a permanent duty that nobody ever wrote down. You stop being someone who is good at this, you become the person responsible for it forever. A lot of workers think they are being developed when they are actually being recruited as shock absorbers. Development gives you scope and a clearer path. Absorption just gives you more weight in nicer language. The seduction works because nobody braces against a compliment. The second version is harder to spot because it does not arrive as words. It arrives as missing words. Your boss tells you to handle the analysis, but never tells you what good looks like. They mention the deadline, but not the standard. They name the audience, but not the scope. They leave a comment on your draft that just says, "Tighten this up," with no indication of what they actually want tightened. They walk away before you can ask, and they are unreachable when you try later. Now you are the one interpreting what they meant, defining the standard yourself, anticipating mistakes they did not flag, building the process from scratch, and cleaning up the misalignment when it shows up 6 weeks later in a meeting you were not invited to. That is not execution. That is cognitive labor. You are doing the thinking they were paid to do while they keep the title that comes with having done it. People treat ambiguity in the workplace like an unfortunate accident. In some teams, it is a tool. Vagueness is not always laziness. Sometimes it is strategy. The third version comes wrapped in adrenaline. The boss creates an emergency they could have prevented 3 weeks earlier and then makes the emergency yours. They never opened the email from legal. They forgot to loop in finance. They missed the approval window. The clients allegedly moved the timeline, although nobody else seems to have heard about it. Suddenly, there is a deck to build by tonight. A document to turn around in 2 hours, a stakeholder who needs a response before close of business. Their failure to prepare gets renamed as the team needing to step up. What gets handed to you in those moments is not just work. It is the cortisol of fixing something that was never your fault while pretending the whole thing is normal. You absorb the panic so they can keep looking composed in front of whoever signs their performance review. The fourth version is the one most people underestimate. The boss is somehow useless with the reporting tool. They cannot figure out the expense system. They are lost in the CRM. They have been asking for help with the tracker for 2 years and have learned exactly nothing. So you do it. Every Friday afternoon, you do it. Eventually, you stop being asked because everyone already knows. That is the moment you should pay attention to, the moment when nobody has to ask anymore. That is when the transfer became permanent without a single conversation acknowledging it. Operational power lives inside that work. Whoever runs the systems holds the team together while receiving the least credit for it. There is a hidden class system inside office labor. Strategy gets applauded, maintenance gets minimized. But when maintenance collapses, every strategy collapses with it. And the people doing the maintenance know that long before the people offloading it ever do. The boss who cannot use the tracker is not just avoiding work. They are making sure that someone else's job is to remember everything they would rather forget. The fifth version is one of the most dangerous because it never sounds like an order. It sounds like a request for help. Can you help me draft the update? Can you take a first pass? Can you sit in and keep notes? Can you sanity check this for me? Can you just coordinate the stakeholders? Can you make sure this does not fall through the cracks? Help is a soft word. It implies temporariness, partnership, shared effort. In the wrong mouth, it functions as something else entirely. Take a first pass means write the whole thing. Sanity check this means rebuild it. Just coordinate means chase 4 people for 3 days and absorb whatever frustration they aim at the project. Make sure this does not fall through the cracks means make sure it does not fall through your cracks. You wrote the draft. You took the pass. You held the notes. You owned the piece. When it lands well, your boss describes it in the all hands as something they led. When it lands badly, you were close enough to the work that the blame finds your inbox first. You did not get tricked once. You got tricked in slow motion across weeks, one favor at a time, until the favors were a permanent part of your job description that nobody bothered to write down. The most expensive favors of your career will be the ones nobody ever called favors. The sixth version should make you the angriest because it is the cleanest example of how this whole pattern actually functions. Watch when your boss is present and when they are not. They are at the kickoff. They are in the brainstorming session. They are visible during the alignment call, the leadership review, the moments where reputations get built. Then accountability shows up and they are gone. The follow-through, the escalation, the conflict with the stakeholder who is upset, the awkward correction, the moment somebody has to take responsibility for what went wrong. Suddenly they are in another meeting. Suddenly they trust you to handle it. They keep the authority layer of the job. You inherit the consequences layer. They are not avoiding all work. They are avoiding risky work. They want status without exposure, and somebody has to absorb the exposure for them. Look around the next time something goes wrong on your team. Notice who is in the room when the bad news has to be delivered and who suddenly had a conflict. The seventh version operates above any single task at the level of culture. Over time, your invisible labor stops being noticed at all. The reminders you send before deadlines, the loose ends you track because nobody else does, the new hire you informally onboard because their actual manager has not made time, the errors you fix without making a scene so nobody loses face, the vague leadership messages you translate into something the team can actually act on. All of it becomes the price of admission for being seen as a team player. The moment your helpfulness becomes structurally expected, it stops being kindness. It becomes unpaid infrastructure. They turned a gift into a baseline, and now they get to act disappointed when you do not exceed it. The eighth version explains why the trap survives even after you can see it. The rescuing employee gets paid in a very specific currency. They get praise. They get access. They get language about being trusted, indispensable, the go-to person, the one leadership relies on. They get a sense of closeness with the people in charge that feels almost like belonging. For a lot of people, that feels like enough. For a while. What they often do not get is a higher title, a bigger paycheck, real authority, formal recognition, structural protection, or a lighter workload. The reward is symbolic. The cost is material. You are paying in time, energy, and stress, and being reimbursed in compliments. That exchange feels worth it for a long time because emotional reward hits faster than structural reward. Your nervous system gets the dopamine before your bank account ever sees the difference. By the time you do the math on what you have actually been paid, you have already trained the entire system to expect the trade. The cruelest part is not that you were used. The cruelest part is that for a long time, you thought being used was the same thing as being valued. The ninth version is the enforcement layer that holds everything else in place. When you finally try to push back, even gently, the response is rarely an open threat. It is something more efficient. I thought I could count on you. We all have to pitch in around here. This is what leadership looks like. I need people who are solutions-oriented. I am surprised you are pushing back on this one. This is not a great time to be rigid. Notice what just happened. The conversation is no longer about the work. It is about you, your character, your reliability, your professionalism, your future. You came in to discuss a workload issue, and somehow you are now defending your identity as a good employee. That is the move. That is the whole move. You are no longer managing your time. You are managing whether the people above you still believe you are one of the good ones. To say no is to risk being rebranded as difficult, uncommitted, not a team player, not leadership material. The boss never had to issue a real consequence. The implication was the consequence. They made you prove you were a good employee by accepting something you should never have owned, and they got to call that a test of character instead of what it actually was. If part of you is still skeptical, that is healthy. Plenty of bosses are messy without being calculating. So the real question is when this stops being a personality flaw and starts being a system. If it happens once, it is sloppiness. If it keeps happening in the same direction with the same people paying the cost, it is a system. 5 conditions tend to show up together. The incompetence is selective, appearing around certain kinds of tasks and disappearing around others. The same people repeatedly absorb the cost, which means the work routes to 1 or 2 specific employees rather than getting distributed across the team. The pattern produces a real benefit for the boss, whether reduced workload, preserved reputation, or avoided accountability. It continues even after it has been raised, observed, or made visible, which means it is not an honest mistake waiting to be corrected. And attempts to set boundaries get socially penalized rather than respected. When all 5 run together, you are not dealing with a struggling manager. You are dealing with a system that has learned to extract from you and is now defending its right to keep doing it. The painful question underneath all of this is why good employees keep falling for it. The answer is not flattering, but it is honest. The best employees are often the easiest to exploit because they are allergic to letting things fail. They are ambitious. They are afraid. They are conscientious in a way that makes them physically uncomfortable watching anything collapse in public. They want to be indispensable because indispensability feels like safety. They hope the extra work will be remembered when the next promotion cycle rolls around. They are confused about what leadership actually looks like and assume it must look like absorbing whatever lands on them. They feel guilt around saying no. Some of them learned in unstable workplaces or unstable households that survival means catching whatever other people drop before it hits the floor. Put all of that together and you get someone who will hold an entire team upright rather than let it stumble in front of an audience. The boss does not need you to be weak. They need you to be responsible. Your conscientiousness is the resource being mined. Underneath every behavior in this pattern, there is a set of incentives that almost nobody names out loud. They never quite say it plainly. That is the whole point. They leave just enough blur to hand you the work and deny the handoff later. Plausible deniability protects them from being accused of delegating things they should not have delegated. Status preservation lets them stay clean while you handle whatever is messy. Risk transfer keeps their reputation intact while yours absorbs the impact of every failure. Labor opacity makes it almost impossible for anyone above them to see how much of their job is being done by someone 2 levels down. And then there is the competence tax, the simplest and most brutal mechanism in the whole system. The better you are at your job, the more broken work routes through you. Skill becomes a magnet for unowned tasks. The reward for being capable is more responsibility without more authority, more pressure without more support, more expectation without more recognition. Excellence does not get protected, it gets taxed. This is why the burnout that comes from this pattern feels different from the burnout of just being busy. Burnout gets worse not when workload is high, but when workload is unfair, unclear, and unsupported. Doing extra work in an environment where the rules are blurry, where credit travels upward and consequences fall downward, where asking for help is read as weakness, breaks people in a way that pure volume never does. Workers in this situation often think they are exhausted because they are inefficient. The truth is closer to the opposite. They are exhausted because they have been carrying weight that was never theirs, under conditions designed to make carrying it feel like the only safe option. So, what do you actually do if you find yourself inside it? Setting boundaries is not wrong as advice, it is just too soft to be useful on its own. The countermeasures that work are operational. Move work from verbal to visible. If something was agreed to in a hallway or on a video call, send the follow-up note that puts the agreement in writing. Make ambiguity expensive for the person creating it. When you are asked to help with something, ask the clarifying question that forces the structure into the light. Just confirming ownership, I will support X and you will finalize Y. Who owns final approval here? What should I deprioritize if this becomes my responsibility? These are professional questions. That does not mean everyone will like them. The people benefiting from blur will sometimes treat clean questions as aggression because clean questions break their setup. That is not a reason to stop asking. That is confirmation that the questions are working. You are forcing hidden transfers into the open, and they do not survive being seen. Stop rescuing without leaving fingerprints. If you are going to help, make the help visible, because invisible help becomes invisible expectation. Separate helping from owning and refuse to let those two collapse into each other. Track patterns rather than incidents. One missed email is nothing. The same boss missing the same kind of email for the fourth time in a quarter is data. Test what happens when you stop overcompensating in one specific area. You may discover that the work you thought was essential was simply being absorbed by you because you were the only one willing to hold it. Stop confusing access with advancement. Being trusted by your boss is not the same as being promoted by your boss. Being close to leadership is not the same as being protected by it. Emotional reward is real. It does not pay your rent, and it does not appear on your resume. Almost nobody says this part clearly, so it is worth saying now. A lot of workers spend years thinking they are overwhelmed because they are not efficient enough. They buy the productivity books, they wake up at 5, they optimize their calendars, they blame their own discipline. None of it works because the problem was never speed. The problem is that they have been turned into the cleanup crew for someone else's strategic helplessness, and no amount of personal optimization fixes a structural transfer of labor. You cannot out-organize a system designed to route unowned work toward whoever is most responsible. You can only see it for what it is and stop volunteering to be the one who carries it. Some bosses do not rise by being more competent than everyone else. They rise by making sure someone competent is always close enough to catch what they drop. The reason you are tired is not that you are bad at your job. The reason you are tired is that you have been doing 2 jobs while being paid for one and being told the second one was a compliment.